Hey, I'm Keith Keppner.
And I'm Melissa Keppner.
And we're the founders of Keppner Boxing and Keppner Boxing Franchises. So in this video, we're going to talk about what we learned, the good and the bad, from competition and training with combat sports. There's some things just kind of off the rip that you feel like, maybe like, what's one of the biggest things you feel like you gained from competition with combat sports?
It's a tough question.
Yeah.
You know, because I feel like there's, like, it's funny because, like, I wouldn't do it again, but I wouldn't change that I did it.
Yeah.
You know,
you don't regret it.
I don't regret it. I definitely learned a lot from it. I think I learned a lot of grit. You really have to, you're putting yourself out there. It's not like team sports.
Yeah.
And so you have to be entirely responsible for your wins and losses.
Well, and like you talk about with grit, right? So you and I both, I think, got to experience this. I think I probably would have had challenges even without being sick, but being sick, going through Lyme disease and going through Lyme treatment made it very hard, where it's like one day I spar, I do great. The next day I spar, I get the hell beat out of me, not because I sparred someone different or because I was in, like, doing something wrong, but it's just the
body.
Yeah, the up and downs of my health at the time. Yeah. And so, like you said, the grit, right? Dealing with challenge, dealing with trouble, dealing with obstacles, and continuing to proceed forward to the best of our ability and making adjustments.
Yeah.
And
well, because, you know, it's like this idea that, like, okay, like we've always talked about, there's 3 points of safety in the ring, right? There's the referee, right. There's the doctor, and then there's your corner. And so, like, you're not really, when I went in there, I was always telling myself, like, I would never make the decision to quit. So that's not, like, my decision to make, even though it's funny because it's like, it's your body up there.
Yeah.
It's your body up there, but in a way, like, the fighter mentality is to be that I'm not going to be the one that tells me when it's done.
Absolutely.
Because I'm not looking at it from the outside.
Yeah, and that's the warrior concept, and you got warrior tattooed on your foot.
I do. Heart of a warrior.
Chinese.
Yes.
Exactly. Yeah. At least you think that's what it says, right?
Well, yeah. Usually, I tell people it means like number 5 Wushu chicken when they ask. Yes. Yeah, I know. So funny.
But it's like with boxing, right? I remember you and I talked about this with fighting. Is that how not that it's a reflection on somebody like, oh, you're a bad person if you're not like this or whatever, but we talk about newbies when you're sparring, right? And like when I first started sparring as an adult, I sparred a couple times as a kid, but that doesn't really count. And then when you started sparring as an adult, like we talk about, we never turned our back, right? Meaning that like when you're sparring, for those of you that haven't sparred before, that sometimes when you get overwhelmed, there's different things that people do naturally, right?
Yeah.
Some people, like us, maybe look at the floor like this.
Yeah.
Or some people turn their back, or some people call that tucking your tail.
Or put their hands out.
Put their hands out.
Yeah, they just basically, like, stop, quit.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's kind of like stop, quit. Versus, like, you and I didn't do that.
Yeah.
We found that out. I mean, we didn't know each other when we were first starting, but, I know that I would just, like, try to show up, and still try to be there.
Well, that became one of my really bad habits, was like looking at the floor, because I would just put my head in and put my head down and go in.
Which though is a better habit than
turning around.
Away,
you can get seriously hurt that way.
Or like being like, stop! Like
you might not be cut out for combat sports if
and that's okay.
That's your reaction. That's okay.
Doesn't mean you're a bad person. Just means it's not.
But
for
even
you, right?
so, it's a human reaction. So a lot of people turn around when they spar, and then they go on to
pop their head up and
go on to be successful.
So like my first Golden Glove champion, right? I don't know if we still have the videos. I'm sure somebody does. But first few, I mean, the guy went on. He's got like 12 pro fights now, doing great. Yeah. But man, a reflection. First few times he sparred, quite a few times he sparred, turning his back, like tucking his tail.
He was a big guy, so he could kind of get away with being like.
Yeah. But yeah, it's like frankly,
just like turn around,
turning away. So, and that's part of the journey.
Yeah.
Part of the journey is overcoming natural reflexes.
Yeah, learning.
And doing that in very painful and very difficult situations.
And exposed situations. You're exposing yourself not just physically but emotionally too.
That's right. Well, I remember you told one of women boxers when I first met you about how many times, because they were embarrassed about crying after sparring, and you told them about how many times you've done that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even when you had a bunch of fights, you know, even when you had 10, 20 fights.
Oh,
you know.
man, probably after I had more fights, I would cry even more.
Because you had a higher standard for
yourself. I had
yourself.
a higher standard for myself. Yeah, I had a very high standard for myself anyways, which is like, it's a good and a bad thing.
Yeah.
You know,
I remember
your friend or your enemy.
Yeah. I remember one time this world champion kickboxer that my father trained as a boxer, and he trained me a little bit when I was a little kid. When I was getting into boxing and just kind of, you know, first like 6 months. And I remember I was like hitting mitts like with him, and I felt I looked like crap. I just felt embarrassed. So I wasn't even sparring. I wasn't getting hit or anything like that.
Just felt embarrassed about the way you were.
Yeah, and I remember after he left, like I cried to myself. It's like, oh, I'm crap. I'm garbage.
You know what? I did that.
You
It's funny. That just totally reminded me of a mitt work session that I had with my old coach when I was having some stomach issues.
Yeah.
And things like that. I wasn't doing well, and it was like we'd go run, and every time I'd get like terrible cramps when I run and things like that. And so we'd just run, and I was gonna do like 3 just quick 2-minute rounds of Muay Thai pad work with them. Like, and it's intense, but it was like, you know, that video. I remember we videotaped it too. I don't have that video anymore, but it was like at the end I cried because I was just so disappointed in, you know, the ability that I just couldn't do it as well as I wanted to do it. And,
absolutely.
You know, it was a struggle.
Absolutely.
And all it was 3 2-minute rounds of pad work.
Yeah,
right?
so it's just you're like, gosh, I should.
And I was in it. I was 10 plus fights in it at that point. So.
Yeah. So experience and change that. And that's something interesting that I know that I believe you've experienced. I maybe didn't get, I guess I got some opportunity to experience this, but a little bit of imposter syndrome sometimes because, you know, I think you've told me this where like, you know, you don't acknowledge yourself for being as good as they actually are. And it doesn't necessarily change the more experience you have. It just really what changes is your ability to deal with it.
Yeah, and your ability to actually like do what you're able to do.
Yeah.
It inhibits your...
get out of your own way.
Yeah, get out of your own way. You're going to doubt yourself, and then even the things that you're capable of, you won't be able to do because you have doubt about them.
I remember that's something I didn't really learn until about probably my last 6 months of boxing and training. I finally got out of my own way, and it was a world of difference. I was flipping doing 8 rounds, 10 rounds of mitt work with my dad. Like, you know, my dad always worked mitts super hard.
Yeah.
Everything was power. So
I remember mitt work with you.
Yeah,
and that was like mitt work with your dad.
So there's no like touch, flow. Really no pause. The only pause is like if I was moving myself away to like not
have to
do another combination. No one shot. Everything was a combination. Putting 3 or 4 or 5, 6 shots together with double, triple jabs in the beginning and the end of the combination.
Exactly.
And I finally got out of my own way and learned how to relax and to reflect with my sparring. I remember the second to last sparring set. Maybe it was like a few sparring sessions before my last one. But my dad said it looked like me cutting through butter. Because it was just, I got out of my own way. I got out of my own head.
Yeah.
And that's something as well.
It's attention, yeah.
Yes, attention. And that's something as well. It's like with people that are thoughtful people that are intelligent, right? Sometimes those people can have the biggest trouble with fighting. I'm not saying that fighters are stupid. I'm just saying people that overthink.
Yeah, the smartest people are usually the ones that
the
have
more
the
intellectual,
most overcome.
Yeah, the more intellectual and the more kind of, and the more trouble you have and the more kinesthetic you are, the more you are just like, do it or don't do it, the better you do. The more you simplify it, the better you do it in a lot of ways.
Yeah, you don't want to overthink it at all.
Yeah, because I tell you, overthinking can be the death, and it gets in your own way, right?
Oh yeah. Well, it's funny because like I'd see people do this all the time, and I've had the same experience of like, you know, when I first started training, you know, my coach would really get you in really high condition level. Because, you know, the first thing that happens in your first few fights is that you get worn out because of the adrenaline and all of the, you know, excitement and things like that. And the better condition you are, the more you can overcome that.
Right.
But it's funny because it's like all you really need to be able to do is 3 2-minute rounds in the beginning, okay? Right? So it's like I'd be doing intense boot camp workouts. I mean, literally... My coach was an ex-Army Ranger, so I mean, we wore like full BDUs and like crawled out in the grass and things like that. So I was like able to like crush those workouts, right? Like, twice a day.
Wow.
And then I'd spar for like 3 2-minute rounds. And I'm like, I can't do this. Like the first round, I'm like, oh my gosh. And people would be like, I don't understand why I'm so tired.
Yeah.
And, obviously took a really long time for me to realize it was the tension.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you're so tense when you're sparring in the beginning. And it's like that is one of the biggest things and the hardest things to overcome.
Absolutely. So. And I think one way that I try to use to explain it to people sparring and people that want to be a fighter and whatnot is they're coming into it is like swimming's another place and running's another place where I felt that where it's like, but specifically swimming, because swimming has some of the maybe danger. You're in water, and if you don't do what you need to do, water means drowning.
Yeah,
at least in my head. So it's like that to me creates tension when I swim because I'm making sure I'm not going to go under. So same thing with sparring or fighting is there's tension because not doing your job and what you need to do means hurt, concussion, death. Yeah. It could mean those things. People have died in the race. 100%. And so that's part of the journey. Funny thing is how you really, your biggest asset of a fighter was not funny, but it's interesting, is that your biggest asset as a fighter was your persistence in the ring, right? Yeah. That was your biggest asset. It
was not my skill.
Yeah, just going straight for it, your conditioning, your discipline.
Yeah.
And,
my mentality. It was I didn't have a perfect record.
But you had a winning record.
I had a winning record, but it just because you have a winning record doesn't mean a lot of people think, man, winning record
It's all about who you
15
fought.
15-2.
It's all about who you fought.
I mean, I probably had about a third of mine were losses, or half of those were losses.
Yeah. So you won 75% of the time.
Yeah, man. But it's but I never quit. Yeah. And it was like the fights that I had that went the distance that I lost. It's like. It was hard getting fights after that because when people take a fight against somebody, it's like they kind of want to feel like they're going to win, And that's like somebody with the record that I had, it's like, oh, it's very possible you'll win against me.
Yeah.
But it's not going to be easy.
Yeah.
And it's,
a lot of risk for little reward.
Yeah. And it's funny because it's like there's people that are putting their record out on the line to fight somebody they could legitimately win, but 90% chance you're going to win by points because I've never been stopped.
You won't get to win in a spectacular way.
Yeah, and it's going to be tough.
Yeah.
And a lot of my losses were split decision losses.
And that's where in the fighting world, a lot of times fighters, and if I would have been able to continue fighting, I might have become a similar person, maybe. Or
I think you would have had more skills.
Hopefully I would have had more skills and progressed, who knows, right? You can always say if I woulda, coulda, whatever, right?
Coulda, shoulda, woulda.
Should all over yourself or could all over yourself. But the thing is that you become, a lot of fighters that are good become kind of gatekeepers and become kind of pigeonholed into a position where they're going to be tough and they're going to be good, but they maybe just don't have that one little thing which makes them like the top, right? And really a lot of times it's a mentality thing. Yeah. And then, or sometimes it's just frankly a talent thing. Yeah. Like I was talking to multiple world champions older brother, right? Yeah. And tell him, like last week, right, he called me up and he was telling me about how, his younger brother, was just naturally talented. So this guy, the older brother, he was like a national champion, 15-1 as a pro. Yeah. I looked him up. But he just, like his younger brother, he had it. He just had that extra something, which, not everyone has. But I think what's important with fighting is that you learn through competition and everything else, you learn that you may not have that something, but you can do pretty damn well if you plug in all the other disciplines.
Other things that you have control over.
Yeah, and it's a reflection of life. And I tell you, one of the great lessons that I learned from fighting and training, and it's a similar lesson to what my father learned. He told me this lesson before I learned it, but I used him teaching it to me to find it and learn it, is that once you've competed and once you've fought and once you've, been in the ring against other people your own size, your own skill level, people better than you, and people that don't care about you and they're going to beat the hell out of you if they have the chance to, and you have to survive, and they're literally doing everything they can within the rules to destroy you and kill you, and if you're in the right mindset in a fight, you're doing the same thing. Once you go through that, then the rest of life, if you compare it to that, is pretty easy.
Yeah, it's not nearly as stressful.
Yeah, because I remember in the beginning kind of getting into doing like radio shows, speaking in front of people, getting nervous about different things that I was going to do. I would use the tip that my dad taught me, and he said he did the same thing where he would get nervous about something. He'd be like, okay, well, how is this in comparison to when I fought in front of a bunch of people and got the hell beat out of me, right?
Yeah, and it's funny because it's like performing to me, so it's like that was something I was always able to do, but it's not necessarily something that I want to do anymore. So it's like when I was younger, obviously I was a lot more adventurous. So like, you know, I was a solo violinist and, you know, or did solo violin and, you know, played very seriously for many years. And so I performed like not just like with groups, but like literally completely exposed. And then that was like kind of the same thing when I stopped playing violin and I started, you know, fighting. It was like, that's kind of what I was missing. I was missing being able to perform, right? But it's funny because now that doesn't appeal to me as much, right? I don't want to be in that limelight, in that spotlight. You know, obviously I'm older now. I'm a mom. Like there's a lot of things that have changed. So it's funny. It helps in other areas of my life to ease the stress of like, hey, at least I don't have to go out there and like fight somebody in front of a whole bunch of people.
Yeah. Well, and that's for instance like that little part as well, stages of life, right? Yeah. And if you overstay your welcome, it's a bad time. Yep. And, you know, you made the decision partially because of your health. But
yeah, and it's funny, I don't know if you remember this, but because I said this before and I said it's not really up to it's really hard for a fighter to say when their time is done, whether it's during a fight or whether it's time to hang up their gloves. And I remember expressing that to you, like, you need to tell me when, like, I'm done. Yep. You know, and
that was a hard thing for me because you know, like our relationship was built around in a lot of ways that relationship of the fight thing. And so I remember that was really hard for me. And that's where that's a good point, is that how the mentality of a fighter in a fight, if you don't have the proper protection in your fight, it can do you wrong and hurt you. It can kill you. And the same thing is that mentality as a fighter with your career. If you don't have the support, if you don't have the coaches, if you don't have the management that actually cares about you as a human being, then the fighting mentality can kill you as well and destroy you. And that's where it's like with myself, I was blessed to have a fairly severe neck injury in Mexico when I was boxing, because my dad, you know, he's no longer with us, but he loved boxing so much and he was so passionate about boxing, and he believed in his ability, but he also believed in my ability. He believed in my will. He told me many times, hey Keith, he had 30 fights as an amateur. He said, hey Keith, if I was struggling with as much of what you struggle with through boxing, with going through treatment, extensive antibiotic treatment, and Lyme disease, all this stuff, all this crap that you deal with.
All the symptoms.
He said, I would have quit. He said, I would have quit years ago. And I was still trying to make something happen. I wanted to be a world champion. You know, you wanted to be a world champion. Was that if I didn't get blessed with that injury, though, then my position and my health right now at my age would be way worse. Yeah. Because my father, because he believed in me and he believed in himself, he would have continued to try to do his best to help me succeed in boxing. And I would have been so, because I'm a very dead set driven person, and I am willing to, I have that fighter mentality. I'm willing to die to do what I'm doing, and like you were as well. Yeah. And so I would have ended up, you've had some damage from your style of fighting that you had. Yeah. I think I probably would have more damage because of me physiologically having a big skull, so I could take more shots. Probably would have got, probably been able to take bigger shots. And obviously, the power discrepancy between male and female is different.
Yeah, absolutely.
But also my own neurological challenges from Lyme disease, from an actual illness. So again, that sounds like us saying boxing, combat sports are no good. They are good when you have the right coaching in place, when you have safely. Yeah, and also when you have the right goal in mind as an athlete. Because as an athlete, the goal should be to truly, you want to win, right? You want to win championships, everything else. And some people are able to be a professional and able to actually make a living. Because remember, professional and making a living, two different things, right? You can be a professional boxer, like many that I know.
Most don't make a living.
And you don't even make a living. Yeah. And your job is to be like meat. Okay, so it's like making
an opponent,
making a living as like you are like the shrimp at Kroger.
Somebody's gonna eat you up for dinner.
Yeah, somebody's gonna eat you up. That's how you make a living. So or like you're like a cow and people milk you. I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm just like crapping all over that, but it's true because it's so sad. It's so sad. And most people are delusional, unfortunately, and they're supported by other delusional people that think they have an opportunity and a chance. And
it's exploitation.
I've been in that dressing room so many times.
Yep.
And I'm happy that I wasn't the fighter in that dressing room. And, you know, and sometimes it's the best of intentions which is going to lead us to those places. 100%. And that's where, as a coach, I had to do that change in development to learn, look, the goal is human actualization. The goal is to be your best self. And being yourself, best self is not being very damaged at the end of fighting, to be in a position that some people we know have been in and losing your life as well. Yeah. So it's a very important thing. But I hope this was of interest, and I hope this was beneficial round perspective of our own experience. You know, going from you being a classical violinist to a fighter, me being artsy fartsy musician person as well, and then getting into fighting, enjoying those aspects, and then us, of course, taking the gifts that we learned through that and sharing it with other people, with our business and with our franchise.
Absolutely.